When I married Emily, I thought we were the perfect team. We'd been together for 5 years before tying the knot, and I'd always admired how independent she was. She had this kind of quiet strength, the kind that made you think she could handle anything. I loved that about her. She had her own job, her own goals, and I never once had to worry about her being reckless or irresponsible. We met in our late 20s at a mutual friend's game night, and even then, she was the one with her life seemingly in order. She worked in marketing for a mid-sized company, made decent money, had an apartment that was tastefully decorated, and a car she owned outright. I was the opposite, still paying off student loans, still figuring out where I wanted my career to go. I admired her stability, her self-sufficiency. When we got engaged, I told everyone that I'd finally found someone who grounded me. The first few years of our marriage were honestly blissful. We rented a small townhouse, both worked full-time, and shared expenses evenly. I handled the rent and utilities, and she handled groceries and smaller household costs. We didn't have a joint account at first. We were both used to managing our own money. But after about a year, we decided to open one for shared expenses. I remember her being oddly hesitant about it, though. She said, "I just like keeping my accounts separate in case of emergencies." It wasn't an argument, just a conversation, but I remember thinking it was strange that she seemed almost anxious. At the time, I brushed it off. I figured it was normal. Lots of couples keep their finances semi-separate. I didn't press. Looking back, that was the first small red flag. We talked about buying a house often. I'd grown up with the classic dream, the little two-story place with a yard and maybe a dog someday. She wanted that too, or at least she said she did. We started saving, setting aside money every month. I even built a spreadsheet tracking every expense, every contribution, every dollar we could spare. Emily, though, was always catching up on something. Sometimes it was her car insurance. Other times it was a credit card thing she didn't elaborate on. Just small stuff, she'd say, kissing my cheek when I'd ask what it was. "Don't worry, babe, I've got it covered." I trusted her. God, I really did. Then about 3 years into the marriage, we started seriously looking at houses. We'd built what I thought was a decent nest egg, around $45,000 between us. We'd been pre-approved for a loan, and I was excitedly combing through listings every night after work. Emily, though, seemed nervous. Every time I brought up actually talking to a mortgage broker or putting in an offer, she'd change the subject. "Let's wait until the market cools a bit," she'd say. Or, "Maybe after the holidays when things calm down." It didn't sit right with me. Then one night after dinner, she said she wanted to talk. Her voice was shaky. We'd just finished washing dishes and she sat me down at the table, her hands trembling around her glass of water. I remember thinking she was going to tell me she was pregnant. My heart actually leapt. I was ready for that kind of news. But she looked like she was about to be sick. "Before we move forward with the house," she began, "there's something I need to tell you." Her voice cracked. My stomach dropped. She went on to explain that she had some debt. "Not a lot," she said at first. "Just some credit card stuff she'd been paying off since before we got married. She'd kept it to herself because she didn't want me to worry. She said she was embarrassed." I tried to stay calm. "Okay," I said carefully. "How much are we talking about?" She avoided my eyes. "Around 15,000. I exhaled, more out of relief than anything. That wasn't nothing, but it wasn't catastrophic either. We could work with that. "All right," I said. "That's manageable. We can come up with a plan to—" "There's more," she interrupted softly. That was when my chest tightened. She took a long breath, tears forming in her eyes. "It's not just the credit cards. There's also a personal loan, and a store card, and a line of credit I took out a while ago." I stared at her. My heart started pounding. "How much, Emily?" She hesitated for what felt like forever before whispering, "About 60,000, maybe a little more." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I genuinely thought she was joking. 60? As in 60? She nodded, crying now. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to get so bad. I thought I could handle it." The room felt like it was spinning. I remember gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. She'd hidden $60,000 of debt from me for 3 years. I didn't even know what to say. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was shock. How was that even possible? How could she carry that much debt without me noticing? And then I realized she'd been meticulous. She always handled her own bills. She'd never asked me for help, never missed rent, never bounced a check. She must have been juggling cards, moving balances around, keeping it afloat. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She sobbed, covering her face. "Because I didn't want you to think less of me." I was stupid, and then it snowballed. I kept thinking I'd fix it before you ever had to know. I just sat there, staring at her, trying to process what my life suddenly was. The woman I'd trusted completely had been lying to me for years, about something this big. That night, I barely slept. I lay there next to her, listening to her breathe while my mind raced. And all I could think was, if she could hide this from me for 3 years, what else don't I know? The next morning, I felt like I was waking up in someone else's life. Everything looked the same bedroom, the same woman beside me. But my trust in her had cracked like glass. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of it. $60,000, 3 years, lies every step of the way. Emily woke up late, puffy-eyed from crying. She reached for me, but I pulled back slightly. Not enough to be cruel, but enough that she noticed. I could see the guilt in her face as she whispered, "Please, can we talk?" So we did. Over cold coffee and stale toast, we sat at the kitchen table and went through the wreckage of her confession. "I started using credit cards a few years before we met," she said quietly. "It wasn't for anything extravagant at first, just groceries, gas, stuff I could pay off later. But then I lost my bonus one year, and I started carrying balances. Then I used one card to pay off another. You know how that goes." I didn't, actually. I'd always been careful with money. I'd spent most of my 20s digging myself out of student debt, learning how to budget the hard way. So hearing her describe it so casually, it made me angry, but also sad. She wasn't reckless for the thrill of it. She was desperate. She went on. "After we got married, it got worse. I thought I'd be able to get it under control once we combined finances, but then I didn't want you to see the statements. So I opened new accounts. I took out a loan to consolidate, but I kept using the old cards because I didn't have enough to cover everything. I thought I could fix it before you noticed." 3 years, Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've been lying to me for 3 years." She flinched. "I know. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you without losing you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The silence between us stretched on, thick and suffocating. Finally, I said, "I need to see everything." She blinked. "Everything?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Every statement, every account, every payment, all of it. If you want to fix this, we start with transparency." She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. That night, we sat side by side at the dining table with her laptop open. I watched her log into one account after another, credit cards I'd never heard of, loans with terrifying interest rates, a store card for furniture we didn't even own anymore, $5,300 on one card, $8,700 on another, a personal loan for $22,000, a line of credit with $14,000 outstanding. I wrote it all down. By the end, the total came to $67,482.13. I stared at the number on the page. It didn't even look real. "Jesus Christ," I muttered. Emily sobbed quietly beside me. "I've been paying almost $1,200 a month just in minimums," she said. "I thought I could manage it if I picked up extra work. But then I got sick last year and—" I looked up sharply. "Wait, when you said you had that stomach flu for a week?" She nodded miserably. "I was working overtime at the agency to get a bonus. I didn't want to tell you I was doing it for the debt, so I lied." It hit me like a punch to the chest. Every small inconsistency over the years, every work thing, every late meeting, every time she said she didn't want to go out because she was tired, had been part of this massive lie. I didn't yell. I didn't even have the energy. I just sat there numb, listening to the sound of her crying. After a while, she said softly, "I'll understand if you can't forgive me." I rubbed my face with my hands. "I want to," I said honestly, "but I don't even know where to start. I feel like I don't know you anymore." That night, we didn't touch. We didn't even say goodnight. I lay there awake, staring into the dark, while she silently cried beside me. Over the next few days, I tried to function normally. I went to work, did my job, came home. But every time I looked at her, all I could think about was the debt. It had infected everything. Even small things like when she bought groceries or when her phone buzzed set me on edge. I didn't trust her anymore. Still, I couldn't just ignore it. We had to deal with it somehow, so I made a plan. I called a financial counselor and set up an appointment for both of us. Emily agreed to go, though I could tell she was terrified. The counselor was kind, but blunt. After reviewing the numbers, she said, "This isn't insurmountable, but it's serious. You'll need to tighten your spending and possibly consider a debt management plan." Emily nodded like a scolded child. I sat beside her, silent, just absorbing the reality of it. Afterward, in the car, she turned to me and said, "Thank you for not walking out." I stared out the windshield. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "I'm still trying to figure out how to look at you and not see a stranger." She started to cry again, and I hated that part of me still wanted to comfort her. In the following weeks, things between us were tense but functional. We made a budget, cut back on unnecessary expenses, and started sending payments to consolidate the debt. She even picked up freelance work to contribute more. But something fundamental between us had shifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that our marriage had been built on a lie. And no matter how much progress we made financially, the trust just wasn't coming back. And then, one evening, about a month later, I got a letter in the mail, addressed to Emily but sent to our house. It was from a debt collection agency. My heart sank as I opened it. The amount listed wasn't part of any of the accounts she'd shown me. It was another $12,000. When I saw that letter, something inside me snapped. I just stood there in the kitchen, holding the envelope, staring at that number, $12,000, like it was mocking me. I felt sick. I'd spent weeks trying to rebuild even a shred of trust, convincing myself that Emily had finally told me everything, that we could start over. And now this. She was upstairs in the bedroom when I walked in, my voice shaking. "Emily, what the hell is this?" She looked up from her laptop, confused at first. "What is what?" I tossed the letter onto the bed. "You tell me." Her face drained of color the moment she saw the logo on the envelope. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Don't," I snapped. "Don't. Oh my God, me. What is this?" She started to stammer. I forgot about that one. It's an old account from before we got married. I thought it was closed." "Bullshit," I cut her off. "You didn't forget. You've been lying to me this whole time, and now you expect me to believe you just forgot about $12,000? Tears welled up in her eyes again. "I swear I didn't mean to hide it. I thought it was paid off years ago. I never got another statement until now." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I'd spent nights helping her sort through every account, every statement, every number. And somehow she forgot this one. "Emily," I said, my voice cold. "You looked me in the eyes and promised you told me everything. You cried. You begged me to trust you. And now I find this?" She was shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really didn't mean—" "No," I said, stepping back. "You meant it. You just didn't think you'd get caught." She covered her face with her hands and started sobbing, but I couldn't feel sympathy anymore. Something inside me had gone numb. I left the house. I don't even remember where I drove, just that I needed to get away. I ended up in a grocery store parking lot a few miles away, sitting in the car for 2 hours, staring at the steering wheel. My phone buzzed with texts from her. "Please come home." I didn't lie this time, I promise. "It's just a mistake. Please, I'll show you everything." I couldn't bring myself to reply. When I finally did drive home, she was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and swollen. There were papers scattered across the coffee table, statements, emails, payment histories. She'd apparently spent the entire evening pulling everything together again. "It's from an old credit card," she said hoarsely. "I used it for school years ago, before I even met you. I thought it was closed after I paid it down, but they must have sold the balance to a collector. I didn't know until today." Her explanation sounded plausible, but I couldn't tell anymore if she was being honest or just spinning another story. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't. My gut had stopped trusting her mouth weeks ago. I sat down across from her. You need to understand something, I said quietly. It's not just the money, it's the lying. Every time I think I've got the whole picture, there's more. I can't live like this, waiting for the next letter, the next secret, the next surprise. She nodded, tears dripping onto the papers. I know. I know I ruined everything, but please, I'm trying to fix it. Trying isn't enough anymore, I said. She broke down again, and I just sat there, feeling detached, like I was watching someone else's life play out. Over the next few days, I barely spoke to her. I went to work, came home, ate dinner in silence. I couldn't even look at her without feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. Then one night, she came into the living room holding her phone. I called a bankruptcy attorney, she said quietly. I think it's the only way out. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. Bankruptcy. I didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, I asked, Are you sure that's what you want? She nodded. I can't keep up with the payments. Even with the consolidation plan, it'll take years. If I file, I can start fresh. And maybe you can too. I looked at her, realizing what she was implying. You mean file alone? She nodded again. It's all in my name. You wouldn't be affected. That should have been a relief, but it wasn't. It just made me feel sad. Sad that we were at the point where she was talking about financial and emotional separation in the same breath. That night I couldn't sleep again. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about the vows we'd made. For better or worse, for richer or poor. I'd never imagined those words would feel this literal. In the morning, she had an appointment scheduled. I didn't go with her. When she came home, she said the attorney confirmed she could file individually, but it would ruin her credit for years. She said she didn't care. She just wanted me to have peace of mind again. But I didn't. The bankruptcy wouldn't fix what was broken between us. It would erase numbers, not lies. 2 nights later, while she was in the shower, I checked her phone. I hated myself for doing it. I'd never snooped before, but I couldn't stop the paranoia anymore. I needed to know there wasn't another secret waiting to explode. And that's when I saw a text thread labeled Mark Bank Rep. The first message was months old, but my stomach turned when I saw what she'd written. Hey, can we move the payment again? My husband can't find out about this. I stared at that message until the screen dimmed. My thumb hovered over the phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My husband can't find out about this. Those 7 words made my chest go tight. I scrolled back through the thread, my hands shaking. The messages went back months, before the big confession, before everything blew up. It wasn't constant texting, but enough to make it clear this wasn't some random misunderstanding. I'll send what I can this week, Mark. Please don't call my work. Can we push the due date again? I'm still catching up. Thank you, I swear I'll make this right. He can't know. Please. That last one was dated about 2 weeks before she first told me about the debt. I remember just sitting there numb. Everything she'd said, the tears, the apologies, the promises of honesty, it all unraveled in my head like string slipping through my fingers. When she came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, humming softly like it was just another night, I couldn't even look at her. I was holding the phone in both hands, trying to calm my breathing. Who's Mark? I asked quietly. Her humming stopped. She froze. What? I looked up at her. Who is Mark? Her eyes went wide when she saw the phone in my hand. You went through my messages? She said, her voice trembling, defensive. Answer me, I said, louder this time. She swallowed hard. He's from the bank. He was helping me set up a payment plan. And you told him I couldn't find out? She went pale. It was before, okay? Before I told you everything. I was scared. I didn't want them to call you or send mail here. I stared at her. So you were lying even while pretending you were about to come clean? She took a step toward me. Please, listen. No, I cut her off, standing up. You don't get to do this again, Emily. You don't get to cry and tell me you forgot or didn't mean to. You've been manipulating me for years. Her voice cracked. I wasn't manipulating you. I was protecting you. From what? The truth? I snapped. She flinched, clutching the towel tighter around herself. You don't understand how ashamed I was. Every time I wanted to tell you, I'd panic. You've always been so good with money, so responsible. I didn't want you to look at me like some screw-up. I let out a bitter laugh. Congratulations, you managed to make me feel worse than if you just told me in the first place. She started to cry again, whispering, I'm sorry, over and over like a prayer. I walked out. This time I didn't stop at the driveway or the store parking lot. I just drove until the city lights disappeared behind me. Ended up on some empty highway's shoulder, headlights illuminating the trees. I turned off the engine and sat there in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about the betrayal, the years of pretending, the fake reassurances, the half-truths. The realization that every "will be okay" was built on sand. When I finally came home hours later, she was asleep on the couch, still in her robe, tissues scattered around. I didn't wake her. I just went upstairs and lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, my mind cycling through every moment we'd shared. Every time she said, don't worry, I've got it covered. Every smile that had been a lie. The next morning I told her I needed space. I'm not leaving you, I said, but I need to step back for a while. I can't think straight when I'm in this house, and she looked devastated. Where will you go? My brother's, I said simply. Just for a few days. She didn't argue. She just nodded, tears running silently down her cheeks. At my brother's place, I finally told him everything. He listened quietly, not interrupting, just nodding now and then. When I finished, he said, That's brutal, man. But she sounds scared more than malicious. I sighed. Yeah, but does fear excuse 3 years of lying? He shrugged. No, but people do stupid things when they're drowning. That sentence stuck with me. When they're drowning. I went back home 4 days later. Emily looked like she hadn't slept. The place was spotless. She'd cleaned everything, maybe as some desperate attempt to make things feel normal. She'd also made dinner, but neither of us ate much. I emailed the bankruptcy attorney, she said quietly. I'm going through with it. I'll take care of all of it. You won't have to lift a finger. I nodded, staring at my plate. Okay. For the next few weeks, things settled into a weird, fragile calm. We barely talked about the debt anymore. She focused on work, and I focused on pretending I wasn't falling out of love. But one evening, as she was going over paperwork for the bankruptcy filing, I noticed a name printed on the creditor list that made me frown. Who's Fairway Medical Group? I asked. She froze for half a second too long. It's just a medical bill. I looked closer. $10,000? She avoided my eyes. It was from when I had surgery a few years ago, before we got married. Emily, you never had surgery. She went still, her lips parted, eyes darting toward the papers. Did you? I pressed, and that's when I realized she wasn't just hiding money problems anymore. She was hiding something else entirely. For a moment, I thought I must have misheard her. The air went still between us, and I could hear the clock ticking from the other room. You said you never had surgery? I repeated quietly. Not before we met. Not since. Emily's face was pale. Her eyes darted to the paperwork and then back to me. It wasn't exactly surgery, she said finally, her voice trembling. I felt that familiar wave of nausea. Then what was it? She took a deep breath, clasping her hands together like she was bracing herself for an impact. It was a procedure, she said. A medical thing I didn't want to talk about before because it was personal. Personal? I echoed, my voice rising. You've hidden 70 grand in debt, lied for 3 years, and now you're calling another 10 grand personal? What could possibly still be off limits? Her eyes filled with tears. Please don't make me say it, she whispered. Something inside me broke. Then don't, I said sharply, pushing my chair back. Keep your secrets. Clearly that's what you're good at. She flinched, her shoulders shaking. It was for fertility treatment, she said suddenly, blurting the words out so fast I almost didn't catch them. Before we got married, I didn't think I'd ever have kids naturally. I tried IVF once with a donor when I was 30. My mind went blank. I didn't tell you because it failed, she continued, crying harder now. And I was ashamed. I thought it made me broken somehow. I just wanted to forget it ever happened. I sank back down into my chair, my thoughts spinning. You did IVF before we met? She nodded weakly. Yes. With a donor? Yes. And you hid that from me our entire relationship? Her voice cracked. It didn't matter anymore. I wasn't trying to hide something ongoing. It was just something I regretted, and I didn't know how to bring it up after we got serious. Every time I wanted to, it felt too late. I sat there staring at her through a blur of anger and disbelief. For 3 years, I'd thought I knew every piece of this woman, her laugh, her habits, her fears, and now I was realizing there were entire chapters of her life she'd locked away. She wiped her face. I paid for it through a medical line of credit. That's the Fairway bill. I stopped payments after it failed. I couldn't bear to look at it again. Then it went to collections. I didn't know what to say. My chest hurt. I could feel the heartbreak settling in deeper this time. Not the sudden kind that explodes in anger, but the slow, heavy kind that spreads like rot. I stood up quietly. I need some air. She didn't try to stop me this time. I walked down our street aimlessly, the cold biting at my face. Every light in every window I passed seemed to belong to a couple who probably trusted each other, who weren't sitting on a mountain of lies and financial ruin. I remember stopping at the corner, staring up at a dark sky, thinking, when did my marriage become a stranger I live with? By the time I came back, she was sitting on the couch with a blanket over her shoulders, eyes red and distant. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. I'm sorry, she said as soon as I stepped inside. I never wanted you to find out like that. I just didn't want my past to define me. I let out a long breath and sat down across from her. Emily, your past isn't the problem. It's the lies, the constant hiding. You've built our whole marriage on secrets. She nodded, whispering, I know. And I don't know how to fix that, I admitted. She looked at me with tears pooling in her eyes. Neither do I. For days after that, we barely spoke. She continued the bankruptcy process, spending hours on the phone with the attorney. I started sleeping in the guest room, telling myself it was just temporary, but deep down I knew something fundamental had shifted. One night, I heard her crying quietly from down the hall. I almost went in. I even got out of bed, walked halfway to her door. But then I stopped. I couldn't keep comforting someone who kept cutting me open. 2 weeks later, the bankruptcy was finalized. Most of her accounts were wiped clean or in settlement negotiations. We should have felt relief, but instead the silence between us was deafening. Then one morning she left a note on the kitchen table. I'm going to stay with my sister for a bit. I need space. Maybe we both do. I'm sorry for everything. There was no argument, no fight, just absence. The first few days without her felt strangely calm. No bills, no confessions, no crying, just quiet. But the quiet turned into loneliness fast. I found myself replaying everything. The early days of our marriage, her laughter, the small things I'd taken for granted. I hated that I still loved her, even after all this. One night, about a week after she left, she called. Her voice was soft, tired. I miss you, she said. I swallowed hard. I don't know what to say to that. She was quiet for a while. Then she said something that stuck with me. I didn't lie because I wanted to hurt you, she said. I lied because I wanted you to keep loving me. I thought if you knew how bad I'd messed up, you'd leave, and now you're gone anyway. There was nothing to say. I just listened as she cried on the other end of the line until she finally whispered goodnight and hung up. After that, I didn't hear from her for several days. Then out of nowhere, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a man's voice said, Hi, is this Mr. Carter? I'm calling from Fairway Medical regarding your wife's account. I just wanted to confirm some information. My heart stopped. Wait, I said slowly. She already filed for bankruptcy. Why are you calling me? There was a pause. Well, sir, the man said carefully, because your name is listed as a secondary on the contract. I froze. For a moment, I didn't even understand what he meant. Secondary, I repeated. No, that's impossible. I wasn't even there when she took out that loan. That was before we got married. The man cleared his throat awkwardly. I understand, sir, but according to our records, the account was amended in 2021 to include a cosigner. That's you. My blood ran cold. 2021. 2 years into our marriage. The year she told me she'd refinance some things to lower interest rates. I felt my chest tighten. Can you send me documentation? He agreed to email it, and when it came through, I stared at the attached PDF until the room seemed to tilt around me. My name was right there, typed neatly on the signature line of the amendment, except I had never signed it. The date, the handwriting, everything looked official, but the signature wasn't mine. It wasn't even close. My hands shook as I called the number again. The same rep answered, and I barely managed to keep my voice steady as I said, "That's not my signature. I never signed that document." He sounded surprised. "Oh, you may want to contact our fraud department then. If it wasn't you, we'll open an investigation." Fraud department. I thanked him mechanically and hung up, my mind spiraling. Emily had forged my name. There was no other explanation. When she got home 2 days later to pick up some things, I was waiting for her. I didn't even try to ease into it. I just held out my phone with the document open. "Explain this." She froze, eyes flicking to the screen. Her lips parted slightly and I could see the panic flood her face. "Where did you get that?" "Fairway Medical called me," I said coldly. "They said I'm a co-signer. I never signed this, Emily." Her eyes filled with tears immediately. "Please, let me explain." "Explain how you forged my name," I said, my voice shaking now. "Because that's the only explanation I see." She covered her mouth, sobbing. "I didn't mean to. I swear to God I didn't mean to. I was drowning. They wouldn't approve the payment plan without a co-signer, and I couldn't tell you about it. I thought I'd pay it off before it ever mattered." "You faked my signature," I said slowly, each word like a stone in my throat. "You committed fraud in my name." She fell to her knees right there in the hallway, crying so hard she could barely breathe. "I'm so sorry. I was desperate. I didn't think." "That's the problem," I said, my voice cracking. "You never think. You just lie and hope the fallout never hits you." I had never yelled at her before that night, but something inside me snapped. I shouted. Words I don't even fully remember. Something about betrayal, about how she'd destroyed any chance of rebuilding what little trust we had left. When I finally stopped, she was just sitting on the floor, sobbing quietly, staring at the tiles. "I'll fix it," she whispered. "I'll tell them it was all me. You won't get in trouble." But that wasn't the point anymore. This wasn't just about debt or credit cards or hiding shame. This was criminal. This was my wife putting my name on something illegal. I walked out again. I didn't even take a bag, just my wallet and keys. I drove to my brother's place and told him everything. He was quiet for a long time before finally saying, "You have to protect yourself, man. This is beyond forgiveness now." He was right. The next morning I called a lawyer. I felt sick doing it, but I had to. The lawyer confirmed what I already knew. Yes, it was fraud. Yes, it could hurt my credit and legal standing. Yes, we needed to report it and have the document invalidated. When I told Emily, she didn't fight me. She didn't even beg this time. She just nodded, hollow-eyed, like she knew it was over. "I understand," she said quietly. "I deserve whatever happens." Over the next few weeks, everything fell apart completely. The lawyer handled the paperwork, and the fraud department at the hospital confirmed the signature discrepancy. Emily cooperated fully, writing a statement admitting what she'd done. She was terrified but calm, almost eerily so, as if she'd finally surrendered to the wreckage. We stopped sharing a bed, stopped talking about anything but logistics. She started sleeping at her sister's full time. I stayed in the house mostly because it felt like the last thing tethering me to something real. One evening, she stopped by to pick up some remaining boxes. We stood in the living room, awkward and quiet. She looked around, her eyes lingering on the framed photos still hanging. Us smiling at the beach, laughing at a wedding, the life we used to have. "I'm so sorry," she whispered again. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I never stopped loving you." I swallowed hard, staring at the floor. "You had a funny way of showing it." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't love myself enough to believe you'd stay if you saw how broken I was. So I built lies instead." There was nothing left to say. When she left that night, she didn't look back. I stood at the window, watching her drive away, headlights fading down the street. For the first time in months, I felt empty, not angry, not sad, just done. A week later, the lawyer called. Everything had been cleared. My name was officially removed from the fraudulent document. My record was clean, but the house felt haunted. Every object had a memory. Every silence had her voice in it. That weekend, I packed a bag and drove to my parents' cabin by the lake. I sat on the dock for hours, watching the water ripple under the fading light. I kept thinking about how trust, once broken, never comes back the same. It can be rebuilt, maybe, but never identical. Ours had shattered into dust, and as the sun dipped below the trees, I realized something simple and painful. I didn't hate her. I pitied her, because whatever mess she'd made of our marriage, she'd made an even bigger mess of herself. The next few weeks were a strange blur of quiet healing and constant second-guessing. I stayed at the lake house longer than I intended. Just me, a few boxes of food, and silence. It was the first time in years that my life wasn't tethered to her chaos. No bills arriving in secret envelopes, no forced smiles over dinner. But it didn't feel like peace. It felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm, staring at the wreckage, wondering if anything inside me was still intact. Every morning I'd wake early, make coffee, and sit on the porch. I'd scroll through old pictures on my phone. Our honeymoon in Oregon, her laughing as she tried to teach me to surf. Our first Christmas together with matching pajamas she'd insisted on buying. I should have deleted them, but I couldn't. Those photos belonged to a different woman, one who didn't exist anymore. Or maybe one who'd never existed at all. She texted me a few times during those weeks, simple things. Hope you're doing okay. I'm sorry again for everything. Please let me know when you're ready to talk. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't know what to say that hadn't already been said. Forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a process, and I hadn't even begun it yet. Then one evening, I got a text from her sister Claire. Hey, I think you should know Emily's been having a rough time. She's been staying with me, but she's not eating, not sleeping. I'm worried. I sat there staring at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to drive over immediately. Another part of me whispered, you don't owe her your comfort anymore. Still, guilt is a stubborn thing. The next day I called Claire. She said Emily had been struggling with depression since the bankruptcy went through. Apparently losing control of everything, the finances, the house, me, had sent her into a tailspin. She wasn't working. She'd even mentioned not wanting to wake up sometimes. That terrified me. For all the anger and hurt, I didn't want her gone. So I called her. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was quiet, brittle. Hi. Hey, I said softly. Claire told me you're not doing well. A long pause, then, yeah, I guess that's true. We talked for over an hour, mostly her crying, me listening. She said she was seeing a therapist, trying medication, trying to rebuild. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, but I just want you to know I'm trying to be better, even if it's too late for us. It should have been comforting. Instead, it just made me sad, because she sounded so small, so broken, that it was impossible to hate her anymore. A few days later, she asked if we could meet in person, just once for closure. I said yes. Maybe I needed closure too. We met at a small cafe downtown, the same one where we'd gone on our first date 8 years ago. She looked thinner, older, her hair pulled back carelessly, dark circles under her eyes. But when she smiled, a weak, trembling smile, it still hurt my chest. Thank you for coming, she said. We sat for a while in awkward silence, sipping coffee neither of us really wanted. Finally, she said, I've been thinking about everything, about how much I ruined. You didn't just ruin us, I said quietly. You ruined your own peace too. She nodded. I know. I think that's the worst part. I spent years lying because I was afraid of losing you, and in the end, that fear made it happen anyway. We talked for a long time about the marriage, about trust, about how love can curdle into something unrecognizable when fear takes over. There were no accusations left, just tired honesty. At one point, she reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Do you think there's any version of this where we could have made it? I thought about it for a long time before answering. Maybe, I said finally, if you'd told me the truth back then, if you'd trusted me enough to see you at your worst. She nodded, her eyes filling again. I wish I had. After that, we just sat there. No drama, no begging, no promises. Two people who'd loved each other once, looking at the ruins of what used to be their life together. When we stood to leave, she hugged me. Not a passionate, desperate hug, just soft, tired, final. Take care of yourself, she whispered. You too, I said. That was the last time I saw her. A few months passed. The divorce went through quietly. She didn't contest anything. I moved to a smaller apartment closer to work. For the first time in years, I had no debt tied to someone else. No hidden surprises. But there was an ache I couldn't shake. Not for her specifically, but for the version of life I'd believed in. The version where honesty was simple and love was enough. Then one evening, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Thank you for still seeing the human in me when I couldn't. I've paid the last of what I owe. Starting over, for real this time. I hope you find peace too. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I sat there for a long time holding the letter, realizing that maybe forgiveness didn't have to mean reconciliation. Maybe it just meant accepting that both of us had been broken, in different ways, and that healing meant letting go. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and went for a walk. The air was cool, the sky streaked with the colors of early spring. Somewhere in that quiet, I finally exhaled the years of anger and hurt I'd been carrying. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel hollow anymore. Just free. It's been over a year since that letter arrived. I never saw Emily again, not in person anyway. Occasionally her name pops up in mutual friends' stories. Someone mentions she's working remotely now, or that she's volunteering at a local shelter. Every time I hear about her, there's a flicker of something in me. Nostalgia, maybe. Not longing, but recognition. We lived a whole piece of life together. That doesn't disappear, even when love does. I've changed too. I sold the house a few months after the divorce and moved into a small apartment near the city. It's quiet, filled with light, and this sounds strange. It's mine. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall, every bill that comes through the door, mine. No secrets, no hidden costs, no shadow behind the calm. Just life, as simple as it can be. Sometimes I catch myself over-checking things. Bills, statements, my credit report. Trauma leaves its habits behind. But mostly I'm learning to relax again, to trust small things. I've started seeing someone new. Her name's Lydia. We met at a photography class I signed up for on a whim, just to get out of the apartment. She's calm, thoughtful, the kind of person who looks you in the eye and makes you feel seen. We've only been dating a few months, and I've been honest about everything from day one. She knows about Emily. She knows about the debt, the lies, all of it. One night early on, Lydia asked me a question that stopped me cold. She said, "Do you still love her?" I thought about it before answering. "I love who I thought she was," I said, "but not who she became." Lydia nodded like she understood, and I think she did. There's a kind of peace that comes after heartbreak, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet acceptance that life doesn't always follow the path you built in your head. You can spend years with someone, share everything, and still not know the whole of them. People carry parts of themselves they're too afraid to show. Emily's fear was debt, failure, shame. Mine was believing love could fix everything. Sometimes when I walk home from work, I pass by a bakery where Emily and I used to go on Sunday mornings. The smell of coffee and fresh bread still takes me back. I can almost hear her laugh if I close my eyes. The real one, before everything got complicated. But I don't linger. I keep walking. A few weeks ago, I found that letter again while organizing my desk, the one she'd sent after the divorce. I unfolded it, ran my fingers over the familiar handwriting. It felt different this time. Not heavy, not sad, just human. I realized then that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about accepting that it did happen and that it doesn't define you anymore. I can acknowledge the pain, the betrayal, and still wish her well. Maybe that's the final stage of love, the kind that doesn't want anything back. I've kept one photo of her, not on display, just in a drawer. It's from a vacation we took in Maine years ago. She's sitting on a dock, hair blowing in the wind, smiling at something I said. Whenever I see it, I remember how happy we were before the lies, before the weight of her secrets crushed us both. It's easy to rewrite people as villains when they hurt you, but the truth is rarely that clean. Emily wasn't evil. She was scared. She built a house of lies because she didn't believe she was worthy of love inside the truth. And I stayed too long, hoping love could dig us out of a hole built on deceit. It couldn't. But maybe it made me softer, wiser, more careful with the next person who trusts me with their truth. Lydia and I spent last weekend at the lake house. I hadn't been there since everything happened. The dock was still there, the water calm and glassy. I sat on the same spot where I'd once decided to end my marriage and felt something shift inside me. Not closure, just peace. As the sun set, Lydia sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. We didn't talk much, just watched the water turn gold. And for the first time in years, I felt present. Not haunted, not angry, not hollow. Just here. If there's one thing I've learned from all of it, it's this. Trust isn't a promise someone gives you. It's a risk you take every single day. Sometimes you get burned, sometimes you don't. But it's still worth trying again. Because despite everything, despite the lies and the tears and the debt and the broken nights, I still believe in love. Not the kind that hides, the kind that stands in the light, unafraid of what it shows.